Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We have a very special lineup today. So good to see some new faces, some familiar faces. Thank you for joining us today. As I said, we have a very special crew joining us for this month's collective impact call. We have Zach over here. I'm sure he's not a new face. Founder of Farmers Footprint, Project Biome. Project Biome is Farmers Footprint's mother organization, and we have Stella Horgan over here. She is the executive director of Project Biome, and Matt Purkis, managing director of Project Biome South Africa. And well, myself, I'm Alana, managing director of Farmers Footprint. And it's good to see you today. Zach, I'll kick it over to you.
Wonderful. What an honor to be with the crew, and so delighted to be on with this whole collaboration. This has been about an 8-year journey to get us to where we are today, and so many of you in the public have been such a huge part of this. We would not have made it 2 weeks without really interesting level of global support that happened back in 2019 in those first couple months that we launched this project. We got unexpected traction globally that really lent itself to a demonstration of the demand from the world as to where we could both best be in service. And that has led us to where we are today. Is 8 years of listening to the environment has really demonstrated where we can be of service to a globe that's in massive tumultuous change and shift, some of which is done by human industry and human impact, much of which is just natural processes playing themselves out, and humanity trying to figure out how we fit into that matrix of constant change. And for that, we've seen this extraordinary revolution of the nonprofit industry. And it's been fraught with a lot of challenges and a lot of manipulation and some dark sides to it. And those have played out at the scale of hundreds of billions of dollars over time that have been used to really advance the special interests of industries and perhaps an agenda that was not friendly to Earth or humans. And so it's been a challenge to experience a constantly shifting environment and to keep sensing into what's needed. But what became clear by the beginning of this, when we made the film Farmer's Footprint, it was a film before it was a brand of a nonprofit. And the term farmer's footprint came from a Japanese proverb that says that the best fertilizer for a garden is the farmer's footprint. And we had a deep appreciation for what that meant, is that when humans slip off their shoes and walk on the earth again, we have the opportunity to go into right relationship in which our presence becomes a blessing to a garden or the diversity around us rather than an exploitation of it. And so that was the initial film. While we were filming the film, we realized how desperately clueless I was, as well as the scientific community and the consumer industry at large, at the limitations of the organic industry and organic certifications and these kinds of things. And so we realized there was a need for a radical change in our perception of the food industry, supply chains, not just into food, but apparel and the fuel industry and plastics and everything else that comes out of our agricultural systems today. But we knew that we were going to be redundant if we just jumped in to be an activist group out to call out the wounds and injuries of the system and the bad players, if you will, towards that. If we were here to call out Monsanto or Roundup as the problem, we would just be adding to the noise and maybe not becoming part of the solution. So we kept looking for that space, and Farmers Footprint did an amazing job of being this direct to consumer, direct to farmer listening machine through storytelling. And what we found over time was that a documentary featuring a doctor's perspective on the cancer rates and glyphosate in the Mississippi River had absolutely no impact on the behaviors of our regulatory environment or our farmers at large. And Alana and team have discovered that it's really farmers telling their stories to farmers, farmers telling their stories to consumers that started to change change the world and started to really effectively create the change we wanted to see. And so we really became appreciative of the impact of storytelling as a front face of change and how to communicate and empower change at the grassroots level. At the level of institutions or organizations, we recognized more redundancy. By the time when we started this out, I had my whole team across both my for-profit and nonprofit environments at that time read the book Blessed Unrest from Paul Hawkins. And it demonstrated that we already have the largest social movement in history happening with 4.5 million nonprofits working globally to improve the relationship of humans to nature and humans to one another through ecologic and social impact. And 4.5 million nonprofits were making no progress. And in fact, things were getting worse every single year under Paul's studies because they were disconnected from one another and they were all functioning within the scarcity mentality. And so when we set out to form the nonprofit, we had this goal of how do we become a solution rather than part of the fractured, redundant scarcity model of nonprofits. And so we took a biologic approach, which is human bodies only become human bodies when the organ systems are interconnected by these fiber optic cable systems of the connective tissue. And so we call it fascia, we call it neural networks, but these are all just communication networks and connective systems that allow a multi-organed, multicellular creature with 70 trillion human cells interacting with 14 quadrillion mitochondria and another 1.5 quadrillion bacteria to become a single human body. That's done by connectivity. It's done through radical communication and shared resources. And so in that, Project Biome really stepped up to ask that challenging question of how do we become that connective tissue for 4.5 million nonprofits. Over the last 8 years, that 4.5 million has grown to 10.5 million nonprofits globally working in these spaces. And so we have this logarithmic growth of a desire for impact, social revolution happening every day. But there's a lack of metrics, a lack of governance, and a lack of access to the trillions of dollars that are now being committed by governments and NGOs and family offices globally, trillions of dollars being committed to a better earth. And yet that money doesn't have a place to land because the impact is not being measured or understood or communicated on the ground. So that's where Project Biome steps in to create that connective tissue. And Stella is going to take us through how we've started to build out that system through a unifying vision of the 3 Rs: rewilding, regeneration, and reconnected economies, and how our specific projects are starting to be that fabric that can connect organizations, consumers, farmers, governments worldwide into a collective social revolution to change absolutely every aspect of the way in which humanity is walking on the earth, with the hope that we do slip off our shoes and do put those footprints into the earth again that will mark a regenerative revolution by our presence rather than our busy industry. I yearn for the day where our presence becomes felt by nature and she feels beautiful for the way in which we perceive her, and she'll grow more vigorously for our perception. That's what we're here to do as humans, I believe. So that's a little bit of a run in of where we've been. A deepest appreciation for Stella and Alana for their leadership of these organizations with Project Biome, Farmers Footprint. But there's also a whole mess of people behind the scenes here that have been stalwart in their dedication to creating a complex system. It's very challenging to be willing to be in the embryonic phase of a project for 8 years. We have not yet felt like we emerged from the birth canal in some ways because we've been in such a long gestation of figuring out what is nature actually calling forward. And it's just in these last few months where we feel like we're emerging into this new world. And it's been really incredible to take our first breath as kind of this new agency that's breathing in new air from a continent of Africa that's informing the work that we've been doing in the United States, Australia, UK, Europe, and all of these colonialized spaces. Africa and something about the heartbeat of this planet represented in that continent is really giving us this vigorous first breath as an organization. And it's just been a blessing to be aligned with tens of thousands of you who have provided those consistent small donations that have been our life stream And these family offices that over the last couple of years have started to step up with 3-year commitments to really transform our capacity for longer term impact and project scaling and everything else that we're now doing globally. So deep gratitude to each of you as individual donors and participants in this mission, as well as the family offices that are really coming together to create a much higher level of impact. So Stella, without further ado, I'm turning this over to you, and get ready, folks, for a big rundown of what's going on globally here. Stella, how did we
Thanks.
meet, and where did
Yeah.
it all begin for you?
Thanks so much, Zach. Um, Hi, everyone. Lovely to be with you today. This has been a long time coming. I met Zach a couple of years ago, and I was with one of those nonprofits that was working really hard on on our own. We had some partners, but we started out working in rural South Africa in the northeastern part of the country, near the Mozambican border and the Kruger National Park, in a community which was nearby where I was living at that stage, a rural community bordering, like many, on wilderness and conservation space, and like many South African communities, completely disenfranchised, completely cut off from the mainstream economy, facing very severe challenges of hunger, poverty, and a lot of HIV, a lot of children, child-headed households with no adults in them. So when I met Zach, we'd been working in that community for about 9 years. Some friends of mine and I had, we'd been working there, and we'd figured out that how we could potentially help as we got to know this community was to work with the women, because the women are responsible for households and for the survival of households. And so we reasoned that if we brought permaculture training and business development training together, and so we did that, we synthesized those two modalities and created a course called Permaculture Explorers, and invited the women to participate. And so all of these home gardens started to emerge in the community. The third aspect of our work showed up when the women asked us to help them with the very severe gender-based violence. So a lot of aggression towards women and children in the community. So we started teaching self-defense. So permaculture, business development, and self-defense were our three pillars for women, as well as a course in mentality control. So really starting to understand how the mind works, how our perceptions work, and how important that is when you're trying to create a new reality, is to be mindful of all of the thinking processes that are going on. So Zach, a friend of mine, told Zach, who was visiting the White Lion Trust in the region we were in, a friend of mine told Zach and his team about our work, and they came to visit us, and we had such a deep connection. And we decided then to collaborate, and we thought about what we could do together, and we birthed this idea of 10 trees. So 10 Trees is a project that's been running for a couple of years, and it was the collaboration with Project Biome and the Center for Women's Independence. And the idea behind it is that if each household plants 10 productive trees or shrubs or vines, so productive in terms of food or medicine, then we can effectively eradicate hunger. We can create tremendous nutritional diversity. We can address soil health, water retention, climate mitigation in terms of creating a canopy to mitigate some of the very severe heat. And there are a range of benefits that came out of this program. So it's been running for nearly 2 years, and it is absolutely phenomenal. We're working in approximately 250 households in the one village. So it's now reached the tipping point we were hoping for, where the uptake is natural. We've just added another 50 households to the program, and 57 households showed up, which shows us that there's more interest than we anticipated. We're now at the point where we will be rolling that program out in other communities in the area and potentially in other countries as well. So this has been this incredible, vigorous and generative process of collaborating, bringing ideas and all of the incredible information about agroecology and regenerative um, agriculture into our program, and really cross-pollinating across so many different areas of expertise, and people who are really standing for the love of the earth. So that's how I got to meet Project Biome. And last year, Zach and I spoke, and Zach invited me to come in and work with Project Biome and steer the ship, as it were, be the steward of the whole, and really work with our teams to think into how we collaborate. What does it mean to do radical collaboration? How do we do that on the ground? And how do we do that in the virtual space and online? So Project Biome we've been developing our online community through our Biome constellation, and that's taking shape beautifully at the moment. We're about to launch our Mighty Networks platform, which will enable us to really work across multiple systems, work with farmers' footprints, and in this beautiful collaboration where Farmers' Footprints is joining us in telling the stories of people growing food and of the transformation of food systems and the healing of the planet, the rewilding of the planet. We've started our work intentionally in South Africa because, as Zach mentioned, this is the birth canal of humanity, the birthplace of humanity. And South Africa is an interesting country in terms of what we've weathered as a people, and in terms of our, what we've weathered in terms of being a colony, in terms of massive extractive processes, a country really established by mining and extraction. So we're working with rewilding projects, clearing of alien vegetation, and reestablishing healthy ecosystems, and doing that in conjunction with the healing of food systems. As I said, this meeting, this partnership with Farmers' Footprint has really taken shape in the last few months. And you may or may not have seen the article that was sent out in the last week about our partnership and how we're bridging. This business of storytelling, as we all know, is so crucial. There's often people say that the planet would be better off without humans. But I've heard from an Aboriginal elder about how erroneous that idea is. Her take on that was, but if there were no humans, who would tell our story? Who would tell the stories of Mother Earth? So that is our job, is to tell those stories. And the bridge that Farmers' Footprints that lies between Farmers' Footprints and Project Biome also allows us to bridge the global north and the global south. There's much that we bring. There's so much that Africa brings that can be massively transformational to the global north. In multiple areas, there's resilience, how people have survived unbelievably oppressive systems, and systems that are broken even today. There's so much broken infrastructure in South Africa, and people are constantly finding ways around that to thrive. So I'm really excited about what is about to unfold. And I'm really grateful that you're all on this call to bear witness to the birth of this collaboration, which is starting in a very hyper-local way in South Africa, but is being matched by this growing global community of people who are contributing support, really friendliness, collaboration, really bringing ourselves together. So, Alana, shall I hand back to you, and let's see where our conversation goes.
Thank you, Stella. That was beautifully articulated, and I couldn't agree more. I guess just to take it a few steps back to some of what Zach was speaking to, and how Farmer's Footprint started learning through telling stories. So as many of you know or have seen, we started telling the stories of farmers, and in that process, we learned a lot, and we saw that each farmer's journey was so unique. Starting to tell those stories in the US, some farmers were transitioning from conventional to more regenerative practices. Some were very large scale, some were very small scale. Some were starting their farming project, maybe in a plot of land that they got access to. And as we kept documenting these stories and sharing them, not just with other farmers, but also with people who intersect with the food system, which is all of us, because we all eat, but more consumer facing, we realized that a lot of the predominant narrative in the quote unquote global north, or primarily the US, Australia, and the UK, around regenerative agriculture was really focused on rotational grazing and carbon sequestration. And those are great and really important outcomes of regenerative agriculture. But it's a very limited narrative, and it's also it misses to include so many other core elements of regeneration that are really anchored in the uniqueness of each place, in the story of each culture around the world, and ways that they have known to relate to their environments for many generations. So as we kept documenting these stories in primarily the US, one of the most industrialized, if not the most industrialized agricultural system out there, and starting to connect also with other land stewards and wisdom keepers around the world, we realized that this bridging of paradigms was really needed to continue to develop and share, amplify and share about what this biological opportunity that is regenerative agriculture could mean, and how it would be expressed so differently in different ecosystems. So we've come a long way since the start, since the first film that came out, Regeneration, the beginning. If you haven't seen it, it's up on our YouTube. It's a 20-minute documentary film. It's really incredible and really clear. It really highlights that intersection between human and planetary health, between agriculture and the health system. And as Zach says it, which this has really stuck to me, going from a chemical problem that is industrial agriculture to the biological opportunity and healing potential that regenerative practices, regenerative agriculture has. And as we continue to develop these stories, agriculture focused, and also tying those connections between how the soil microbiome and the microbiome of our gut share so many similarities, we've since also started including a third element to our pillars of health and agriculture, which is culture, which is that unique expression of the lifestyle and traditions and practices that different communities have around the world. So we've also really leaned into that with this collaboration with Project Biome, and facilitating some of those dialogues and conversations as we really see that potential in this moment of history and humanity as we start to look around and realize that a lot of what we've done and we've been doing is not really working for us. It's harming the earth, it's harming ourselves, and it's isolating us, and how really it is the time now to start looking around and coming together and see what we can learn from each other. So to do that, we facilitate a lot of these dialogues through our digital platforms, the spaces. We facilitate dialogues between different communities, different leaders in the space, and really trying to weave this braid that includes agriculture, health, and culture, and really focusing on that global mobilizing through story. There's this quote by Robin Kilmer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, that says that we can't talk about restoration of the earth without restoration, without remembering the stories of the earth and reshaping how we view ourselves as humans and the role that we have to play in regenerating the earth or stewarding the earth, no matter how we intersect with our food system, whether it's at a farming level, as eaters, as cooks, as healers, as community tenders. So we're really excited and have been collaborating a lot with the Project Biome team to see how this global mobilizing through story can be in service to that local organizing and regional impact, through facilitating some of these collaborations and amplifying some of the very unique stories that we meet along the way, or that we meet. So yeah, with that, Matt, I'll pass it over to you.
I'm going to jump in here and frame Matt for a second. Matt, I really want to sing your praises because you're always too humble here, but it's a joy to introduce you guys all to Matt Purkis. All of us are blessed in our lives to suddenly come across somebody who just shifts our concept of human potential, and Matt has done that in such a unique way for me, as so many people on the Project Biome team have. But Matt came in with a long-term personal vision that had been realized to him far before Project Biome had really been conceived, let alone executed, that there was this lack of metrics, governance, and applied science within the regenerative movement. And he had worked deeply through almost every sector of the world of food systems in Africa, of social systems as well. And it was really exciting to see. Yeah, thank you for the muting. And so it was the journey there with his picturing that as he joined Project Biome a couple years ago, he was able to really execute that vision for a solutioning hive, and that's what he's built here, is a system there. So Matt, you can share that. But what we've seen Matt do is really go from the micro to macro in applied science of agroecology and regeneration. And that has gone from this kind of micro version of the projecting, the radical collaboration that Stella was speaking to, all the way to our recent work with the Saudi government, that is the chair of the Green Middle East North Africa Consortium, which intends, alongside of us at Project Biome, to regreen the 1/3 of the northern hemisphere that's currently in desert, which starts at the Sahara, hits the Middle East, Siberia, North India, and North China. 1/3 of the northern hemisphere is in desert and has been for the last 1,000 years, and is ready to go through its natural regenerative cycle. And so to achieve that, Matt has been laying out this extraordinary micro to macro vision and runway for us to make that extraordinary impact that will fundamentally change the entire argument around climate and CO2 in the atmosphere, and all of these things that have dominated the world story is about to radically change because of this pathway of applied science that runs from South Africa to the Sahara and then spreads globally from there. So Matt, such an honor to introduce you to this team. You're a man of so many talents, and you have been running it through every process possible to generate what you've generated in the last 2 years. So thank you for all the sleepless nights and exhausting hours you've kept to achieve what you've achieved. But give us a sense of the micro to macro that you guys and your team have created there for us.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks for that introduction. It's really great to be here with everyone. Yeah, it's been a journey for sure, and a little bit about my personal story, I think, leading up into the space that we're working now, which is the beautiful scale and the tantalizing visions that we all hold for a new world that is in alignment with natural systems as our human species evolves. I started as a humble permaculture practitioner, really doing domestic service. That permaculture bug that bit me was just so profound. It changed my life, really aligning me to seeing how my background in design can be overlaid into systemic change at a large scale level. So going from households to small farms to homesteads to a little bit more of a regional food system lens. And that had been the work building up to joining the Project Biome team, where we had been trying to figure out and really going deep into the programmatic response as to this failing food system that we see not only in the South Africa, but the Southern Africa and African context. So our main design challenge here is that we've got disparate smallholder farmers, very scattered. We've got a dual food system, which is entrenched in conventional synthetic agriculture, and this emerging, and we've got about 2 million emerging farmers in this country where they're not really plugged into the agricultural value chains. So we had taken this stance to really problem solve for that and see how we can decentralize systems, create value chains which are farmer centered, where we really are looking at the business models and how that can be filtered down into regenerative actions at a farm level. This extractive food system that we're all exposed to at an international level, it's a global issue that we're trying to solve here. It's like this radical localization of food systems is really the only way to go, as we saw within COVID and how that struck us so abruptly that our food systems failed like that. The long supply chains were no longer functional. Our retail stores did not have food in it, and we had food parcel lines for kilometers. And that was the situation in South Africa. So we really ramped it up. Around COVID, and that was fortunately when Project Biome landed in region, and we were really starting to figure out how to scale this work. Unfortunately, we have arrived at that point where through this radical collaboration that Project Biome is bringing into the region, this new fresh energy to inspire something new that hasn't been done before, which is ready to get these disparate NGOs, civil society organizations, and ultimately government departments to speak to one another to find that spirit of collaboration. And this is where we're calling on that spirit of Ubuntu, which is born out of South Africa. And it's really around, I am because we are. So it's really about a collective response. We have responsibilities as individual consumers, individual people living on the planet, but we can go further when we go together. And that's really the essence of Ubuntu. Shared responsibility, inclusive participation, and really putting the seventh generation at the front of our thinking. So we can think for the seventh generation that has not been born yet, and may our actions that we take today inform that seventh generation. So really that pulling from that Ubuntu principle is really a main thread of our work. And then as we've emerged, as we've really been working at a grassroots level, what we have discovered is that often the organizations working in the same watershed don't speak to one another. So we have come up with various systems like bioregional accelerator programs where we pull in multiple organizations into the landscape and we start to facilitate, let them witness each other, let them see their beauty around their work, and then when put collectively on the table, it never fails to blow our minds as a collective, right? We literally have the solutions at our fingertips. We have prototyped these solutions globally. And now we need to really start thinking about how to get out of pilot phase into scale it up and replicate. So that's really where we have been applying ourselves as Project Biome and region here, pulling on, my elders. And there's that saying that standing on the shoulders of giants, you get to see much further. And that's certainly been the case here in South Africa. There have been many elders that have been carrying this torch for over 50 years, you know, where agroecology, organic agriculture, and regenerative agriculture was literally the crazy thing to be doing, you know. And as crazy as Rudolf Steiner was in the 1900s when he invented biodynamic agriculture, and really to see how all of these components are really starting to emerge as the solutions that we know in our bodies, in our guts, in our gut microbiomes feel right, taste right. And the experience that we have as a collective when we start to engage with where our food comes from, engaging with a farmer, understanding how to grow soil. And that is really the essence of healing the planet. You know, we have to rewild ourselves in order to rewild nature. And when we start to step into our hearts, leaving the mind at the door, and really experiencing that spirit of regeneration that we all carry, we can really shift the needle. And this is why I'm absolutely so excited to be a human at this point in our evolution on this planet, is that we get to really start experimenting with some of these incredible, never been done before. Like, how do we get bioregional collaboration to happen at scale? I mean, what a fantastic design challenge to be grappling with. And to see what happens when we radically collaborate, the tangible evidence that we have. After a short 2-year stint in South Africa, I can see how this is really going to scale and evolve, not only in Africa, but planetary global health is really at the thrust of this, and the health starts with the soil. Thank you for having me on the call tonight.
Thank you, Matt. That was that was beautifully articulated. And I couldn't be more grateful to be collaborating with all of you here sitting on this call, and to really see, like, we at Farmers Footprint, we've been speaking to consumers for a long time, and to see this organization to organization communication happening with the work that Project Biome is doing is so powerful. Is so powerful because it really does drive that impact home and amplifies it. And I've seen it. So thank you for sharing. Zach, I see you came off mute. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, just really, blessed to hear all this being communicated to you guys here on this call, because it feels like when you're in the room with that newborn coming out and it's taking its first breath. I think that there's humility that's happened through the organization that's really important in this new phase of leadership. As we move from activism to proactivism, we have to become much more humble in our approach. And this has been one of the hallmarks of the journey. As I started as a scientist, blowing my mind over the toxicity of glyphosate, studying it every day in my laboratory as far back as 2012, and really letting that sink into the reality of, my God, this single chemical has unleashed an ungodly amount of disease and suffering on the planet. I got to go tell people. And I started pounding the pavement by 2013 with these messages. I was speaking mostly to doctors and scientists, and our teams has testified in front of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, for multiple years with absolutely no effect. And I got more and more frustrated, and I got angry at things, and I was feeling this deep indignation over the lack of impact. And it was only in the journey into sitting with farmers globally around every continent. I've sat with farmers in India, rural India. I've sat in multiple countries of Africa. I've been throughout Australia and South America and Brazil and Peru and Ecuador and on and on. And everywhere I went, I got more and more humbled by the reality of there's something unfolding in humanity that is not a chemical company. It's a deep, deep fundamental wound between our relationship with nature. And indigenous cultures were really understanding this as they watched colonialism move in. And this colonial instinct for this victim, perpetrator, savior triad has really affected every single area of human behavior globally. And nowhere is that more true than these environmental and social spaces that 10.5 million nonprofits now fill. And this kind of victim of the human being rejected from nature turns us into the perpetrator that would then exploit that nature, that then turns us into the savior that's going to go fix the problem that we created. And that triad just keeps repeating itself over and over again. And so it's not until very recently in my own life that I deeply experienced embodiment of all three of those. Like, what if I am the perpetrator? What if I am? And in that journey, suddenly realized just in recent weeks, it was in ceremony in South Africa, doing a fire ceremony there, that I suddenly realized at a deep cellular level, and I might have even been able to say this in my brain a few months ago, but the cellular level, I suddenly understood and felt at a deep level that all three of those things are the exact same thing. The victim, perpetrator, savior triad is the same thing. And this is very difficult because the human mind is so easy to judge the perpetrator. And so we can look at an Israel-Gaza, we can look at a U.S. situation with Ukraine and Russia. We can see these situations unfolding, and we want to blame somebody. We want a perpetrator there. But in so doing, we actually stabilize the phenomena of the human destruction of everything through this perpetrator, victim, savior triad. And so as you start to really let that be one thing, it suddenly allows you to practice natural law at a whole nother level. Natural law understands everything to be sovereign, and as soon as sovereignty is obtained, polarity naturally occurs through the law of attraction. And so right now, we tend to polarize against the perpetrator, which might be Israel, or might be Monsanto, or might be the education system, or whatever we want to blame. And we polarized against that as nonprofits. We like, well, we can't be that. We need to bond to the victims. And so let's find all the victims of those situations, which are farmers, mothers, children, Palestinians, and let's bond to them, and let's go into an empathetic connection with them and save them. Let's save the children. Let's save this. Let's take down Monsanto. And at no point in that journey do you actually become the actual polarity to change the system. And so we have to understand the whole triad to be one thing. And once we let that become one thing, and we have no further judgment on the victim or the perpetrator or the savior, no elevation of any one of those, and just let it be one thing. This is human behavior as a result of our abandonment disorder from nature, period. We believed ourselves to be abandoned, therefore we felt vulnerable, therefore we attacked the shit out of each other and we destroyed each other and the ecology that we live within. Let that be one thing. And then suddenly the polarity naturally occurs through the new law of attraction, which is creativity. And this is what I see unfolding in Project Biome. We are escaping the victim, perpetrator, savior mentality of humans and nonprofits alike and getting to this creativity phase where we are polarizing to the old humanity and this new polarity being different than polarization. This new polarity is creating a balanced system for us to begin to move humans from one space to another. And we're moving one farmer at a time, one household at a time in South Africa, in the Midwest, in Australia. One family at a time moves from a sense of scarcity and fear and a sense of victimhood that's demanding retribution from their governments and some sort of reclamation of resources, and suddenly shifts into creativity. And we are watching that with women in Bushback Ridge that was described by Stella there. This community of 4 million people that were displaced in the name of ecology. The Kruger Canyons National Park and biosphere is the largest in Africa, third largest in the world. 4 million people were displaced from their native territories to create this ecological space. And those people don't have access to the food that naturally was there for them for 100,000 years. They have no access to the water systems and the game and the food systems that they naturally balanced for tens of thousands of years. And now they're in poverty, and now they're in starvation. Now they're in this 85% of households with domestic violence against children and women. And so we've created, through our separation from nature, the triad of victim, perpetrator, savior. And when we finally see that that was a phenomenon we had to live into, to play out our destiny, which would be to become the existential threat to the planet that would bring her to her knees in her sixth extinction, and for the first time be able to participate as the existential threat to transform ourselves and our relationship with nature, become part of the solution. And there we take darkness into light. And maybe we're the only species that gets to do that, because we seem to be the only species born in darkness, born in the belief that we are separate from everything. The elephant, the oak tree, no separation. Humanity is born into the darkness. I think that's on purpose too. And so each of you right now, as you start to bond to us, I want you to feel what this is. You were born into darkness on purpose. It was by design, so that you could participate in the movement of a small amount of darkness within this cosmos into light. Very few places in the cosmos can do that. The cosmos seems to be a place of balance between dark and light. We sit at a very interesting tipping point in the cosmic history, where a species comes along born in darkness that can move itself to light through a re-understanding of its right relationship to nature. And in that, we can be that prodigal child that goes from seemingly reckless abandonment, disorder, to incredible immediate acceptance by the mother. We are being welcomed back into nature, and Project Biome and Farmer's Footprint is witnessing what happens when we are willing to take that step. Each of you, as our extended family of supporters and co-imaginers, are helping us become the polarity to this old trinity of savior, victim, perpetrator, to become the polarity to that in a new triad that I think looks a lot like compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love for the role that we play in this nature. So let's take off our shoes. Let's go put some footprints in the garden today, and let's see what we can do as a human species that's really inspired to become part of the solution again, not through our doing, but from our willingness to receive. And that willingness to receive is something that we participate in with you guys. We have received so much from all of you. You've supported us so deeply, and we would be really honored for you to continue to deepen that support for these projects running across the globe today. It is working. We sat with Saudi Arabia in January, which is one of the largest, it is the largest economy in the Africa, Middle East region. And we got to feel what it feels like when a government that wields trillions of dollars of impact says, that's what we want. That's what we need. Come back and tell us how to do it. Come back and you become our partners. And so we're going back on September 1st to the Saudi government to show them a pathway by which Project Biome becomes the operational partner to a consortium of countries, 26 countries that have penned an agreement that they can share a vision for regreening North Africa and the Middle East into the most verdant grasslands in the world. And we have a pathway for them to follow. And it's been Matt and his hard work on the ground and the intense, difficult work of relationship building that Alana and her team at Farmer's Footprint and Stella at all of the organizational relations through Project Biome are really starting to put into reality. And so we're going back to state a pathway for trillions of dollars to be able to align with the birth canal of the planet, which runs from South Africa to Egypt and up through Scandinavia. That is called the Golden Meridian. It is the birth canal of the planet. It's the first bacteria, the first fungi, the first humans, all coming out of the same birth canal. There's one Earth, and she is a mother. She has a womb. It is the Ethiopian Ocean. She has a vaginal canal, which is the east coast of South Africa. And she has an incredible life force of birthing children into this global world through this golden meridian that runs up that African continent. And right now she's ready to do that rebirthing process. She's birthing new lakes in South Africa and in the Sahara Desert as we speak, new lakes forming, new rivers ready to flow, elephants amassing in Botswana and northern South Africa, 300,000 ready to march, 300,000 elephants ready to march up those river systems as we take down the fences and give her back her veins of flow. And that feminine flow of Africa will reignite an African continent to become the rebirth place, such that a story of extinction becomes a story of rebirth. And all of you are sitting here with us in that moment. So thank you for being who you are, each of you here at Farmer's Footprint Project Biome. What an honor it's been to be through this primordial phase of embryonic development, of understanding what is nature asking us to become? How do we listen deep enough to know what she's forming in the womb? And each of you have really taken a lot. It's been an emotional journey, and you've each been really emotionally attacked for the work you're doing, even inside of our own organization. And so I just have a huge heart for the willingness of people that will get beat down in this primordial stew of the new beginning of humanity, because what is coming has never been seen. And so we need to release each other of the expectations of old and allow for the primordial redevelopment to happen. And each of these leaders that you're meeting here, and I look forward to you guys meeting many, many other layers of the leadership here at Project Biome and Farmers Footprint, because every single one of them just deserves something that's better than a Nobel Prize. We got to come up with a different recognition system than that antiquated system there. But these are the people that make life worth being curious for. That's how it feels. These people keep me waking up in the morning wondering what could happen next, because these people are hard at work again in listening and imagining a new earth and a new humanity in it. So thank you, each of you, for the way in which you have touched my life through your support for these projects. And if you feel inspired to continue that support, please reach out. You can connect through many agencies, but Alana, why don't you jump in here and finish us off with the connection piece there, and just honored to be with all of you.
Thank you, Zach. I'm just taking a second to let that land. Equally honored and grateful to be sitting here with each and every one of you. And as Zach said, if you are feeling inspired to support our work after this conversation and learning a little bit more, we will be sharing the details on the chat. You can also, just reach out to our team. We'll share the emails in just a second, and you can also find it on our website. Keep an eye out for the story of connection that we've been referencing in this conversation. It's up on social media, and we had an email go out as well, sharing it. Maybe you've seen it already, but it's a beautiful articulation of the Project Biome Farmers Footprint collaboration. And just thank you for sitting with us for an hour, for the last hour. This is the first time that we sit in conversation, this group, after a lot of putting our heads together and figuring out what this wants to become, what this collaboration wants to be. And we seem to be taking steps in the right direction and really seeing what comes out when we work together and stay curious and stay in service. Matt, Stella, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add before we close this conversation.
Just a big thank you for your time and your collaboration with us. It's just extraordinary to have a global community, and really look forward to deepening the connection with you as we go along on this journey. So thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Until very soon, we'll stay in touch, and please do as well. Zach, Stella, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time this morning or afternoon, wherever you are.
Thanks, Alana. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Bye.